So what if details that Syray provided in his recent expert opinion gave us at least a big part of the answer to this Idaho4 question from Jules?
So what would they have actually told the jury? What would the story have been if one of the questions would have been, well, how do you know that it was him if you're starting the suspect's vehicle already in town, but you're wanting us to believe that he left his apartment? Where's the proof that he actually left the area? What would they have done?
How about if the answer potentially moves half of the outstanding questions about Mr. Kohberger's car and movements the early morning of 13 November 2022 from where is the evidence to at least this seems like reasonable suspicion? You have to remember that nothing that Syray has made public has been cross-examined. Many see Syray as Mr. Kohberger's savior, but he might actually end up just being the opposite. Let's go back to Jules talking about already knowing the truth about the car.
You know, it's funny going back to these older exhibits when you know the truth, when you've seen the proof of things that they've tried to claim were supposed to be considered evidence in this case. The car is one of the most important things. And for the majority of you guys, you already know the truth when it comes to the vehicle and the identification and where everything ended up.
So this video is focused on the time frame from the time that Mr. Kohberger reconnected his car to the time that he got back to Pullman. For the purposes of this video, I'm going to assume that 100% of everything that Syray says about the time frame after the crime is true. I'm only going to touch very briefly on the earlier hours as part of the closing. That'll be a future video. So let's start with the important routes. Everyone knows that Mr. Kohberger's alibi was that he was looking at the stars in Waiway Park. I'm only including that route here for completeness. Next is the route that Syray alleges is flawed, but was included anyway in the PCA. Everyone's seen the big horseshoe, and I'm not going to go into any detail about it. That allegedly flawed route serves to contrast the return route that Syray says Mr. Kohberger used. The idea for this video came when I realized that I'd been slightly mistaken about the actual location of the reconnection 9.8 miles south of Moscow, Idaho. That location, of course, is the point at which both the prosecution and Syray say that Mr. Kohberger's phone reconnected to the network.
When all of the available data is mapped, the phone is most likely stationary at this time, about 9.8 miles south of Moscow.
Because of some work-related technical restrictions, I didn't have Syray's full opinion until yesterday. I'd assumed that the reconnection point was somewhere on Highway 95. But Syray clearly states that the CSLI data never can place Mr. Kohberger on that Highway 95. And while that's only likely because Mr. Kohberger's phone was off, I absolutely had to look for the location where the phone was likely to have reconnected. There had to be a point where the phone can only move west without moving south that is still around 9.8 miles south of Moscow, Idaho. Is there such a point? Yes. Thorn Creek Road. In fact, you could pull right off of Highway 95 and stop. But why would Mr. Kohberger need to stop? My best guess is that he was going to take a complex route back to Pullman to avoid traffic cameras and plain old just forgot how to get back there. It's always the little errors, right? This would mean that the only reason that Mr. Kohberger had to turn his phone on at all was to enable his phone's mapping application to get him home. We learned this from Syray. Let's look at the complexity of the route to establish if a map program would be needed. Starting on Thorn Creek, and probably right in front of Mr. Kohberger's car was the right turn onto Bronicky. He'd need to take that for a bit over 2 miles. He'd then need to turn right on Neherkin Road for about 4 miles. After that, he'd turn on Becker Road, and he'd have to go about 3 more miles to Johnson Road, which about 8 miles later would bring him to Pullman, Washington. While there are several ways to get to Johnson Road, this seems to be the simplest without going onto a highway. That said, miss a turn, and the route gets even more complex. Mr. Kohberger likely weighed the risk of turning his phone back on in the interest of avoiding highway travel. Highway travel would have been the far more simple route. There really was no reason for him to use a mapping application otherwise. Syray even corroborates the portion of the travel from north of Johnson, Washington to Pullman. So regardless of his initial choices in terms of route, Mr. Kohberger's map application did get him apparently to Johnson Road. So why does Syray's phone reconnection point become so important? Google Maps tells us why. From the Thorn Creek Road turnoff to the Johnson Road entrance into Moscow takes about 36 minutes. If Mr. Kohberger pulled off Thorn Creek Road, reconnected his phone, and took a minute or two to get his map software set up, and then drove off, might that align with any evidence that the prosecution has? Well, yes. Let's listen to Jules again.
But for the 5:25 and 32nd a.m. car coming back into Pullman, Washington, according to their reports. Camera time approximately 7 seconds behind local time. This time is approximate, determined by time comparison with other cameras at the same business due to frame glitches in the surveillance footage. A vehicle matching the description of Vehicle 1 is seen turning from northbound Johnson Avenue onto northbound Bishop Boulevard and continues northbound. The vehicle does not appear to have a front license plate attached.
One word. Bam.
So why is this really prejudicial to the defense? You have to look at it from the perspective of your average juror and not as a true crime person that has been deeply involved in every detail of the case for the past 4 years. Here is the premise of why Syray may end up not being Mr. Kohberger's savior. Prior to Syray's opinion, even with every allegation accounted for, the fact that Mr. Kohberger had his phone off gave the complete advantage of reasonable doubt to the defense. If the prosecution is able to factually establish the return route using evidence that the defense also corroborates, and they have reasonable imagery that aligns with the travel time, no fog lights, and no front license plate, the advantage of Mr. Kohberger having turned his phone off shifts strongly to the prosecution. Instead of reasonable doubt, your average juror is going to begin to have reasonable suspicion. The only burden that the prosecution then has simply becomes choosing a route, any reasonable route, without cameras, and saying, yeah, we agree with the defense that there is no imagery of the car because he likely took this route. That said, there are two other bits of evidence that have been essentially hand-waved away by the Idaho4 true crime community that would be impactful to your average juror. The first is that it appears that the defense had no plans to contest that the blood on the knife sheath is Mr. Kohberger's. You may not like it, but be mad at Ann Taylor, not me, because that was apparently entered into the record as part of their legal strategy. The other often hand-waved residence is this Bridge Road video of the car. It's not likely to be a green car, as Pav alleges, and there are no visible fog lights that I can see anyway, and the car is in Moscow. They wouldn't even need this last video, though, if they could confirm the route back through Johnson. If you're a person that's actually in search of the truth, the facts and evidence that survive Syray's allegations are probably problematic for Mr. Kohberger, even if he's able to eventually revisit the case in a court of law. If you're not in search of the truth and you feel some level of shock, the shock you may be feeling is what happens when evidence and opinions that have not been cross-examined or otherwise been part of the adversarial process of a court case are taken as fact. Whatever ends up happening with Mr. Kohberger remains to be seen. Hopefully the truth will emerge, whatever outcome that leads to. If you like my videos and how I present the information, please subscribe and like the video.